Hi, my name is Sarah Camrath, and today I'm going to be sharing part two of a video series that I put together for you on the pelvic floor. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at part one, I encourage you to go take a look. There's a ton of really fascinating information in that video about what a healthy pelvic floor looks like versus dysfunctional one. It's designed to help you understand your own anatomy and really to know whether things are functioning properly or not. In today's video, I'm going to share some really tips and tools for how to protect your pelvic floor on a daily basis so that we don't end up with some big dysfunction down the road. So I'm going to share some slides with you here. And sorry, here we go. Okay. So protecting our pelvic floors. Let's see. Okay, so keys to a healthy pelvic floor. Number one recommendation is to breathe fully. And again, we kind of looked at this in video one, but I'll quickly go over why this is so important here, which is basically if you think about the way and what happens when we breathe fully, so we inhale, and again, we bring that breath into our lungs, that causes our respiratory diaphragm to drop down, which essentially pushes the contents of our abdominal cavity downward. So if you think of our abdominal contents in a little balloon here, when we inhale, the respiratory diaphragm drops down, our abdominal contents drop down, and they put a downward gentle, but a downward pressure on the pelvic floor, which causes that to relax and release and expand. And then when we inhale, again, the respiratory diaphragm comes back up, our abdominal contents come back up, and the pelvic floor, the pelvic diaphragm comes back up. And so this breathing, this deep breathing really allows us to kind of massage and relax and release and brings movement and flexibility and pliability to our pelvic floors. So if we're just doing this kind of shallow, very shallow breathing, we're never getting that deep expansion and relaxation, really, and releasing in the pelvic floor. So first, breathe fully. Number two is we want to avoid convenience peeing or just in case peeing. Some people call this JICing. And it seems like it's not a big deal, right? So many of us do it, like whether we're running into a meeting at work or about to run into a meeting at work, or we're about to run an errand to go to the store, or we're about to sit down to watch a movie, or all of these different times in our lives we think, oh, I might as well just go pee before, and without really feeling the urge or the need to pee. And this is actually more damaging than you might think, because essentially we are training this part of our body and the muscles here to work improperly. And we know that if we use a muscle improperly, it will stop functioning properly. So in our bladders, we have these muscles called detrusor muscles. And basically, as the bladder expands and fills up, we have stretch receptors, and then those detrusor muscles engage in order to evacuate all of our urine. So we really want to wait until our bladder is full. This whole process is very important. You know, some people think like, oh, I've got a small bladder. That's actually really not true. We pretty much all have the same size bladders, but just some of us have really poorly trained bladders or bladders with bad habits. So what's normal? So normally we want to be peeing every 3 to 4 hours, and you should be able to count to at least 10 Mississippi. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi while you're sitting there. Like you want the flow of urine to be that long. And again, this is retraining our bladders. So we also want to make sure that we're fully hydrated. So concentrated urine is more acidic and can be irritating. So we might have that urge to pee before we really need to. So we want to make sure that we're hydrated throughout the day. We want to make sure we're waiting for our bladders to really fill up. This is important when we're sleeping too at night. Like so many of us get in this habit of waking up multiple times throughout the night. And again, we're training our bladders to really work dysfunctionally. We should be able to sleep through the night. For many people, this happens, it begins when we are pregnant, right? So it's normal in pregnancy to, we got a big baby, that baby, the uterus sits right on top of the bladder. So it's normal to have to go very often. But what happens is after baby, then we're in the habit, basically we're waking up several times to potentially breastfeed our babies or to feed them. And we think like, oh, I might as well just go to the bathroom. I'm already up. So here's where kind of this getting up multiple times throughout the night for women creeps in. And so we really, after we've had our babies, we want to start retraining our bladders. Even I would encourage you, if you wake up in the middle of the night, you kind of have to go a little bit to try to get yourself to go back to sleep without going. So you can, again, start to build some better habits and retrain your bladder. Let's see, number 3, do not push. So we don't want to be pushing to pee and we don't want to be pushing to poop. And for peeing, I've heard myself say so many times, I'm just going to hurry up and go pee. I'm always like, hurry up and go pee. I don't know whether this is like a type A thing that you feel like you've got a million other things to do and you don't have time to pee, which is obviously ridiculous as I'm saying it. But we're supposed to relax when we pee. We want to relax these muscles in order to release. We don't want to be pushing. We have enough downward pressure here. The pelvic floor has enough work to do holding all of our abdominal contents up. We don't need to be pushing to pee. So one is just relax and take the time to pee. Again, the other thing is on the other side is it's so important to preemptively really try to avoid constipation. Constipation is never fun, not comfortable. And so, of course, then, you get into that pushing, you get into these bad habits with constipation. So best to try to avoid it. And I would say like 2 recommendations to help avoid constipation. My top 2 are hydrating. Like it's amazing what being really hydrated can do to help with constipation. Waking up in the morning and having like a big glass of water with maybe a little lemon in it. Even if you're gonna have your coffee, start with like a big glass of water. I think that's hugely helpful. And then sleeping, like getting enough sleep. There's a big correlation between stress, anxiety, sleep deprivation. All these things kind of cause us to tense up and not be able to release. So we want to get good night's sleep. Again, of course, fiber. We've all heard about fiber, but getting enough fruits and vegetables. And vitamin C is really huge too, kind of mega dosing on vitamin C if you're finding that you are constipated. You can take pretty high doses of vitamin C, and this will help clear you out. 1,000 milligrams, 2,000 milligrams, kind of testing 3,000, see how high you can go without getting diarrhea. It will eventually give you diarrhea, but you can maybe walk yourself right up to that edge. And magnesium is also hugely beneficial for preventing constipation. And we are all hugely magnesium deficient in this country. So that's just a great supplement for everybody to take, but will also help with constipation. So also using proper potty posture. It sounds kind of funny, but we actually have things like Squatty potties now out there. So this is a company that designed something that just sits under your toilet and you put your feet up to get more into that squatting position. Throughout the world, we really, throughout history, have gone to the bathroom in that squatting position. And there are really physiological, great reasons for doing that. If you're not going to fully squat, then you can, and you don't need a squatty potty, you could get like a little footstool or even like a bunch of magazines, whatever. But you want your feet elevated. You want your knees above your hips. You want to kind of lean forward, have your spine neutral, and rest. So relaxing again, maybe your elbows are on your thighs. There's a muscle called the puborectalis muscle. We talked about this a little bit in the first video too. And it's designed, it puts a little kink in the rectum. And when we get in this posture, this kind of forward squatting type posture, and we feel the urge and we allow the muscles to relax, that kink comes out. So that's really big. And again, this is another great time. I've been playing around with this recently, but bring the breath in. So again, if we know that we get kind of that downward relaxing and releasing of the pelvic floor when we inhale. So again, if you're thinking that the respiratory diaphragm is coming down, the abdominal contents are descending, pelvic floor is relaxing on the deep inhale, you can use that and really inhale deeply, hold that breath, feel that widening and that expansion in the pelvic floor when you're releasing, when you're sitting on the toilet. So I encourage you to use your breath here too. Okay, so number 4 is avoid excess pressure. So again, this is all about how do we protect the pelvic floor. And so much of what we do in our daily kind of exercise classes, what we've been led to believe is good for our abs, are those crunches, like the head and shoulders crunching. And what that does, though, is we're just crunching, we're working these superficial rectus abdominal muscles. Those are the six-pack muscles. But all of this pressure has to go somewhere. So when we're crunching like this, we're pushing our abdominal contents down again, and we're putting all of this pressure into our pelvic floor. So 2 things happen when we do a crunch. That has to go somewhere, that pressure. So either it's going to go down into our pelvic floor, or you get the little pooch in the low belly. So neither of these are really optimal. So we want to be focusing more, instead of doing so much of that crunching, we want to think of really lengthening, having good posture, and engaging the more of the transverse abdominal muscles. And again, there's more of this information in video 1, but those are the deeper muscles. They wrap from the back all the way around to the front, and those are really the important core muscles that work synergistically with the pelvic floor. So we want to engage those as well, feeling that pulling up and in. Okay, so number 5. Avoid poor posture and prolonged sitting. So all the sitting we do is probably one of the worst things for our pelvic floors. So we kind of tend to be in this slouching, slumping posture, and that causes the tailbone to tuck under. And again, it shortens the space between the pubic bone in the front and the tailbone in the back. That causes the pelvic muscles to shorten and tighten. And again, if we're always leaning back, our organs are designed for us to be upright. So even our bladder, which is kind of right over this, right by the pelvic pubic bone, if we're leaning back all the time, that weight is really not properly, we're not in proper alignment. So it's important that we move often, that we keep our spine neutral, and again, breathe fully. Also, when we're sitting, we really don't want to cross our legs. This can cause asymmetry in our pelvis, and in these bones. And that, again, can cause kind of tight points, trigger points in the pelvic floor. Let's see. So lastly, I'd like to share with you a little bit to help you understand these muscles a bit better too. There is this anticipatory engagement of these muscles. So there's a neuromuscular component. They will actually, based on messages coming from our brain, turn on their own ahead of our movement. So there's an involuntary, they move involuntarily and synergistically. So one example would be of how this works, to maybe give you an example that you can look at and tie into your own life. Say I have a laundry basket in the corner of my bedroom, and it's full of towels, or maybe just a few towels, let's say, and I'm going to lift that laundry basket up and put it on my bed. But I didn't realize that under those couple of towels, my husband had thrown his 2 15-pound dumbbells. So when I reach over to lift that laundry basket, now I can kind of feel maybe something going on in my low back, in my pelvic floor, in my core. Like the muscles had gotten a different message from my brain, and they had turned on, but not to the level that they needed to. So again, if you notice when you are doing certain activities, these muscles really do turn on right ahead of that activity. This is kind of important to understand too with impact exercises. And this is why I actually think impact exercises, whether it's running, jumping, are really important for our bodies because say when we're running, each foot's coming down, hitting the ground, those muscles are turning on just because of the message they're getting from our brain. And I know for myself, like I'm not a huge runner, but I love to do physical activity every day. I love kind of a 3 mile run, but if say I have been sick or for whatever reason haven't exercised in a while, when I start back up, I'll notice that there's a weakness in these muscles, which means that they have been working in this involuntary way without me really knowing. So again, of course, if you've just had a baby or there is dysfunction, you really want to make sure these muscles are strong and you're secure before doing kind of that running, jumping. But one thing to also be aware of is that when you're walking, people who tend to kind of stomp around, the loud walkers, those people can tend to have some, over time, they can cause some damage to the pelvic floor. You want to walk like you're trying to sneak up on somebody. So this is more protective of the pelvic floor. Of course, if it's, again, you're purposefully going out for that hard exercise, your pelvic floor will step up its game and be there for you if there's not dysfunction. There's also, there are also times where you really want to have more of a proactive engagement too. So thinking of things like coughing and sneezing. If you have any sort of dysfunction in your pelvic floor, if you have any sort of incontinence, you may want to help protect this pelvic floor ahead of a cough or a sneeze. So say you're about to cough, engaging that pelvic floor, giving like a slight brace of like a lifting and lowering ahead of the cough can be really protective. And then maybe for a sneeze that comes on, one of the things that I really like is, you think about with a cough, with a sneeze, there's this like channel of energy that goes straight down potentially. I mean, a cough is really an exhale. So the pelvic floor, a healthy pelvic floor should come up and in. But if we have any sort of dysfunction, we'll often notice with a cough or the sneeze that we get really intense downward pressure in the pelvic floor. So if you are noticing that, then even breaking that kind of channel directly down and sneezing, coughing, kind of leaning over to the side will help, with the pressure not all coming straight down into the pelvic floor. So that is a tip too that I wanted to share. So I hope these tips have been helpful, and I'll share several other videos. In the next video, I'm going to talk more about how to determine if your pelvic floor is too tight or too weak, or maybe both. So this will help you understand like whether Kegels will be beneficial for you or maybe not so beneficial, and what you need to do to really help maybe relax an overly tight muscle or engage a muscle that's maybe a bit weaker. I will also share a video, a yogic practice that really focuses on the pelvic floor and engaging in a healthy way. And finally, a video also specifically for women who are pregnant or maybe just had a baby. So that keep an eye out for all of those videos. And I hope you found this information helpful. I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Thanks so much.